Hello, hello, hello. We're grateful to be here on the day. Welcome to the Worldview TV talk show. And we're excited again on this particular segment of show because we have these two young men with us who are powerful, and we're grateful to be back again with the overall theme talking about the psycho-spiritual insights to movies. And we are following it up. This is our last segment in talking about Wakanda Forever, which is affectionately known to me as Black Panther Part 2. But this is our Part 3 on talking about it today. And so we're grateful to have our host with us. Pastor Joshua Sharon is here with us. And Minister Nick Lee is with us on this segment. And we're grateful to have them with us. We have been really diving into the deep parts of this show as it relates to us in ministry as well. And we had mentioned about the last time we were together, we were talking about how we as leaders predicated on that part of the show of Wakanda Forever when Queen Ramonda and Shuri, Princess Shuri, had to deal with the pain of grief of losing their brother, and then she lost her father as before that and everything. And then Sharif, we didn't talk about, she lost her mother too.
Yes.
And so we want to start with Sharif's grief more than Queen Ramonda now. And then we want to look into the viewpoint from the rivaling enemy, which was that of Namor when he comes on the scene. But let's look at Sharif's grief because, wow, she's young,
Right.
which is a factor. She's inexperienced to death in this level.
Right.
She is also has never really had to step out to be in charge, except for her scientific lab.
Right.
Now she's thrust within a matter of years with her father gone, her brother gone, now her mother's gone because of Namor. And now she has to be, don't forget, her newfound cousin, who was crazy, is gone too.
Right.
But now she has to step up to the plate to be queen. But then when they go through the practices, I'm throwing this all in real hot. When they had the practices in Wakanda that when you become the Black Panther, she has to be able to talk to one of her ancestors.
Right.
And lo and behold, she ends up seeing her cousin Killmonger, which the last person she thought she would see.
Right.
But what makes it worse is she didn't fully believe in the practice of that to begin with because she had a scientific, logical mind. Let's take the first half, because I know I hit you with some stuff. Let's look at that first half, and then we'll talk about the second half, and we'll move from there.
Right.
So who wants to start?
You can start.
Josh, you could start.
Okay.
Yeah, let's get it
That was
started.
a loaded question. What was the question again?
So let's look at that part with Shuri dealing with the dynamics of grief and now the loss of her mother and her having to come into office for the first time ever to take over Wakanda as queen. And her grief behind that and her whole understanding of
Well, with you saying that, she didn't really believe, it reminds me of the quote that I was reading the other day when it said, "Faith is not faith until it's tested." And there are moments where we could be in a place, our bodies could be, but our minds are somewhere else. And until we go through those crises, that's when we are able to really try to maneuver through it. And what she's dealing with also is she's changing roles because she went from being the princess with her father, her brother, her mother. Now she's an orphan, where all of the people that was around her are gone. So she has to find that role. And even when it comes to grief you have to deal with. You have to live in two worlds: the world where the person was there, and then the world without them there now. And that's always the hard part, is that you're trying to live life, but now you have to deal with the reality of they are no longer here. So that is hard for her. And then now she has to be the queen. And now, her family is not there. So she's like grasping at all straws. So it's like she's getting attacked by all sides. And that's what grief does to us, because there are days where we feel like, all right, we got to do this. But then there's moments where we're like, how am I even going to get out of bed? How am I going to get up? How am I going to do things? And grief blindsides us. Grief destroys us. Grief takes us where we feel like we're being ripped in half.
Right.
And that's what we're looking at with her, is that her world has changed.
Absolutely.
Just like we've been, slapped with a pandemic. Our world has been forever changed. We went from hugging, spending time. Now that's nervous because we don't want to catch COVID. So our world is changing, and our world has changed. And we, even as ministers, our world has changed because, we'll minister, we'll move around, we'll do things. But then when grief hits us, we're like, God, are you really there? Did you take a vacation? What's going on? So that's the part that she has to deal with. So her world has changed. The grief has affected everything, and now she has to try to pivot through all of that.
Right.
That forcing to adjust to a situation is what she had to do.
Right.
And unfortunately, as she did not believe in the ancestral plane, and I'll step on that. And then when she goes through this process, and then she sees Killmonger, and she's surprised, probably because she's like that father in Mark chapter 9, I believe a little bit.
Right.
But help not my unbelief.
Unbelief, yes.
And then so she sees him because obviously they have things in common, coming from places of revenge.
Right.
And I think that's why she saw him there on the ancestral plane. As a man thinketh in his heart,
So is he.
so is he.
Yes.
And that's exactly what happened to her. Because she had experienced all of that, and all of us experience grief in different ways, in different forms. But having it back to back to back, and then having the responsibility of a country, of a powerful country, of a similar Ethiopia, I like to think about it. It is hard, it is difficult. But I like the word you use, and I was thinking about it. She pivoted.
Yep.
She pivoted
Absolutely.
because if I could just jump ahead at the end, I remember when she was about to kill Kuku Klan or Neymar, and her mom was like, "Shorty, show him who you are."
Yeah.
And that reminded me of the first movie. And
He
she told the
likes
same
jumping
thing.
to the end, doesn't he?
Yeah, so I just had to get that out there because it was a process, but it was good to see that she chose the right decision, and she used her grief in order to pivot and protect her people, because there's a bigger picture.
Yeah.
Because when we're grieving, we do random things. We act out of emotion, but she was cognitive, and she made the right decision for her and her people.
Yeah. I want to take it back because he jumped the gun.
Yeah, he messed us
He
up.
trying to take me to the mountain before we get out the valley.
Right.
But going back to that point and his intricate point that I need to make pertaining to what both of you kind of touched on. Shuri had to now deal with the grief, but from a psychological, spiritual understanding, we don't pay attention to the fact that we grieve in a notion based on how we were taught. So in the Western world, we have this preconceived notion we'll never die.
Yeah.
Right.
It's understood from the Greeks and the Romans. The problem is that doesn't happen.
Right.
Two, we also have this understanding of death as a thief, as a destroyer, and because of our precepts and idiosyncrasies and ideologies and views on death, we even as Christians have not looked into it to a level where we can understand and respect it as a transition, not as a finalization.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
And because of it, it sounds good
Of course.
to throw wonderful cliches when we're ministering to others during process of grief.
Right.
But when it comes back home, I've been preaching funerals since I was 22 years old. You're talking 30 years now of preaching funerals alone.
Right.
And I had a funeral one time, and I'm not making any mockery, it's just a clear example. I had a funeral one time where the young lady, oh my goodness, I got a flashback just looking at it. She was really irate. And when it got down to the viewing of the body, she was trying to pull her parent out of the casket.
Ooh.
And everybody's trying to stop her. Oh, no, please, no, don't do that, don't do that. So it got to the point I just told the funeral director, just shut the casket down now. And then some folks was upset with me, like, oh, that's so insensitive. She's about to mess up the whole body.
Yeah.
Shut the casket down now. Then we went to the grave. I think this is about the last time I've been to a gravesite almost. We went to the gravesite.
Right.
And it was the cemetery, I won't call it out on public, but the grounds is always with the red clay, and it had just rained the day before. There went my shoes, but had to literally throw them out after I came back from there. Thank God I didn't pay that much for them. What I'm getting to is, when we got there, she acted out again. And she went running up to the casket. She was headed for the casket. Everybody's trying to stop her because now we at the grave site, and they're like, she's going to get hurt. She's going to fall into the grave and everything like that. And they was getting hurt, trying to stop her. And I told the family members and the funeral director, let her go. Just let her go. They said, no, she's going to let her go. Trust me on this. And she ran up there, and everybody thinking she's going to jump in on a casket and stuff. She ran up there and fell right there in front of that casket. She ain't think about trying to jump in no casket, talk all that stuff. Let it be me. We say a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Right.
We do a lot of things that we off the preconceived notion we have about death. And our guilt gets mixed in with it, because I'm sure there's a lot of guilt coming from her. Our guilt gets mixed in with it. Our perspectives gets mixed in with it, and our views. And when it gets all tied in, we don't pay attention to that's what's shaping how we grieve.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The psychological aspect to it shapes how we mourn and how we view it. If we really believed that absent from the body is to be present with the Lord, it wouldn't be as painful.
Right.
Yes.
But note, it's still pain.
Yeah.
Of course.
We're still human,
Right.
and we're still subject to grieve and mourn. But to what cost? And it's predicated on how we're conditioned to believe what death is and what agent it is and what purpose it serves.
Right.
And this is what we have to revisit in terms of being leaders to re-educate how we see death.
Yes.
Right.
Most time folks don't even want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Right.
Death and the devil are the two D's, and it doesn't stand for daredevil, are the two D's that we don't ever want to talk about because we think if we never say anything about it, it won't come to us.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, let's go deeper. Sherry has a double whammy because Sherry now has to deal with her own process, her own grief and pain. She has to deal with how do I do this and the hatred and the revenge that's building up in her. But then at the same time, she also got to hear the story of Namor and what he had to go through, which he had his own process of pain.
Right.
And I don't want to do too much talking because I'm hosting this, but as let's walk down that street for a second, because a lot of times we also only look at pain through one person's lens. And God forbid if it's something of a murderer coming after our family or rapist or what have you, we're not going to look at that too favorably, understandably so. But if we get to hear someone else's story, we'll know why they did or doing what they do.
Right.
We have been so self-centered by this Western viewpoint that we don't take the time to hear someone else's story. How do we do that now?
Eugene Peterson once said, he said, people are not problems to be solved, but mysteries to be explored. And when you take the time to see a person not as a problem, but why do you do this? Instead of, it says, we always say, why are you upset? No, what is hurting you? What's making you feel this way? Why do you feel this way? Because there's always a story of why someone does what they do. And I think that the issue with sometimes in church, sometimes we'll see somebody, we're like, we know they got a problem. And we'll, oh, that person got an issue. And we will assume someone when we're in a pulpit or even when someone talks to us about, we don't know why they do what they do.
Absolutely.
And when you really explore someone's narrative, you'll begin to see why they're in their chapter 20 of what's going on. If you really read the chapter 1, you're like, oh, that was a lot of trauma. That was a lot of things. And even when one of the movies I watched was Dead Presidents. And it was about how after Vietnam, they got, some people got on drugs. But if you saw a friend that you're fighting war with explode on a landmine, all the death that you saw, how would you even respond to that trying to be normal after that war?
Right.
Because, yes, they're going through a world war, but what happens when you go through World War Me? What happens when you have that war within you? If there's issues going on, and your people are looking, I was talking to a pastor, and I said, what's the biggest thing that can hurt you? He said, the enemy in me. And that's what people don't realize, is that there are narratives where people, you listen to them, you're like, that's why you say what you say. That's why you do what you do. Or even when we go to Thanksgiving, you'll see one cousin who hates an uncle, and you don't know why, and they'll tell you, yeah, when I was a child, he came in the room and grabbed me inappropriately. Yeah. Or we'll hear stories of, I was talking to one of my aunts, and I was like, why you don't like, cousin so-and-so? Or when I was a child, he kicked my crib almost in a fire when we was in the house. Wow. All kind of stories like that. Or you'll hear, why that deacon don't like so-and-so? Oh, they pulled out a switchblade after service to fight. There's so many stories, and you're like, what is going... But you understand when you hear their story. And I think the problem is that we label people too fast. Yeah. And we label things too mature. But we also, another thing we don't want to do is allow their narrative to be their excuse for their behavior.
Absolutely.
Because sometimes people say, well, hear a woman, my daddy never loved me, that's why I do this. Well, I'm not him. I'm trying to show you love. But when you are raised on survival versus being raised on love, there's two different stories. There's two different ways. So we get up on Sunday morning and go to church. That's our normal. Some people's normal is going to do laundry. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Going to brunch and mimosas. That's mine's is, okay, we got evening service, afternoon service, going to eat, going to grab food, change clothes, go to... But everyone has a different story. Right. And that even affects us how we minister. Yeah. Because to us, going to a service, dealing with certain things at a funeral, we know what to do. Some people get up and start cursing and screaming when they view the casket. We know that's crazy, but there's some people who's normal that's not our normal.
Right.
And that's the part
Right.
that always shocks us.
Right.
Yeah.
Because what someone thinks is normal is not normal to me.
Right.
You know, I grew up with 2 parents in the home. Some women, mama had a lot of boyfriends. Oh, that was Uncle so-and-so shit. You had a lot of uncles.
Yeah.
You know, you go to the supermarket, you like, oh, I got that for free. Oh, the supermarket man know your mama. The mailman know your mama. So there's so many stories. Then you even have certain preachers where you don't know why they say what they say in the pulpit. You're like, what? Oh, yeah, a pastor broke their heart. That's why they mad and stuff. There's so many stories.
Right.
And that's the thing where everyone has a narrative. But the key is, I want to know your narrative, but then we're like, okay, your narrative can change. Yeah, go ahead.
We don't leave room for transparency. It's interesting now because I see everyone wears masks in the pandemic and keep it on in the churches. But the truth is, they were wearing masks way before the pandemic.
Right.
They're trying to bring them their best selves to church. And unfortunately, from a leadership perspective, there are times where leaders are guilty of asking people that haven't been around, where were you? Not how are you?
Right.
Yeah.
Why weren't you at church?
Yeah,
Is
where's your
everything
tithes?
okay?
Right.
So once we create a space, a real free space to address certain problems and traumas,
Right.
then we can get to the transformation.
Yep, it's a lot of trauma.
That's what I think needs to take place. Like, for example, our church has a men's group and a women's group for everybody. And it's just, you can be very transparent, open, and free without being judged. Because the problem is church people just talk too much sometimes. But when we create that space where people really can feel like they're being vulnerable,
Right.
they really have the mask off and comfortable, then they'll be able to change. It's like preaching to the head and heart.
Right.
Absolutely.
We're so emotive, man, sometimes that we don't think, or we think too much,
Right.
and we don't have any emotions. It's all about that balance,
Yeah.
I think we have. And I think that's, getting back to the movie, what Shuri had at the end.
Right.
Because she was brilliant, but she wasn't spiritual. But when she was able to tap into both, we saw what happened at the end.
Right.
Right.
They came out on top, and it wasn't that many of them.
Right.
As if she was Gideon.
Yeah.
I don't want to keep. I
He
don't
said
wanna keep
he
going with
he
that.
feel a preaching moment right there.
Right. I was like, I feel it too. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
but it is going back to that last part when you said previously, before your last statement, when Queen Ramonda said to her, "See, remember now." I'm about to preach myself because first she had to go into the spirit realm and didn't get who she expected. But now, under the battle, the spirit realm comes to her when she least expects it.
All right.
And so, this is what happens to us as leaders and children of God
Right.
that we don't seem to understand too well.
Right.
We have the choice and option to go into requesting and looking for information from the spirit realm. But he may not come when you want him,
Yes.
but he's always on time.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
And it's the faith and believing. So what it did was, and a lot of times we have folks who, oh, why, God, you got me going through this? Why am I going? Because the hell you're going through
Right.
is what matures your clarity of faith
Right.
and give you the experience that even when you don't see him, you can trust him.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And he'll come when you least expect it, at the moment you were not looking for him. When she was at the point of causing the problem, there's a pastor that said something before that mind-boggling to me. Never heard it put this way before. He says, we have the choice to choose our sin, but we do not have the choice to choose our consequences.
Gotta tweet
She had a choice to kill Namor,
Yes.
that. Right.
but she did not know what her consequences would be by doing that.
Right.
That's why Queen Ramonda had to then appear to her
Yes.
and say, show him who you are.
Right.
But watch this. In order for her to understand that, she had to have been taught to learn who she was.
Yes.
Right.
We are at a time in life, and COVID has exposed it,
Right.
because we've been hiding behind that mask too long. We never knew who we were.
Yeah.
Right.
We quote, oh, we're royal priesthood, and we know the whole thing of chosen generation, and we'll make it sound good and
Right.
nice, but we don't have a clue
Right.
who that really is and how does it apply to us.
Right.
Working on a sermon that I'm throw a commercial in. When Jesus got tempted of Satan, Satan said, look at all this power. If you bow down and worship me, I'll give you this. Now, he knew that belonged to him because God gave him. That's why he's the prince of this world. But Jesus had to know who he was, and watch this, and which kingdom he belonged to.
Yes.
Yep.
So tomorrow, we'll talk about know which kingdom you're working for. Because you got to know which kingdom you belong to, because now when grief and death comes in ways you least expect, nobody wants to see it happen.
Right.
Now when it comes in ways you least expect, you got to know who you belong to and who you working
Right.
for.
Right.
Because if not, it will literally turn into revenge, and not allowing God to take care of the revenge.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
We need to balance the justice
Yeah.
Right.
of God through God versus, oh, I'm going to kill you,
Right. Right.
which is apropos for us to look through the lens, and I don't want to get political, but just touching on it through the lens of what's going on in Israel and Hamas and
Right.
everything.
Yeah.
But we have the challenges here in America too.
Yeah.
A lot of them.
Which lens will we look through when war and threats of wars hits our backyard?
Yes. Yes.
How do we handle that as leaders? Because based on how we were raised, we might want to turn and want to say, oh, no, I'm going to kill you. You kill my cat, I'll kill your dog.
Yeah.
You get another old movie, The Untouchables, and Al Capone was like when Elliot Ness messed this whole thing up. I want him dead. I want his mama dead. I want his daddy dead. I want his dog dead. Burn down his house. Killings and everything. And it can get to that point, even as
yeah.
Christians.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
But you gotta leave room for vengeance of God to step in when needed. Thank y'all so much for coming on this show,
Yeah.
and it's been a wonderful experience.
Hope we answered all the
And we say to you all, as we come to share with you all in the world of viewers, that keep your eyes focused, your mind clear, and learn that we do have a psychological and a spiritual part to everything, but we're telling you the insights of the movies that talks on the psycho-spiritual understanding.
Yes.
So therefore, thank you for coming in the segment to deal with us and work with us and listen to us and watching this Worldview TV talk show. And we're grateful to have our hosts with us, Nick Lee and Josh Sharon. Until we meet again.